In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a multi-channel video. Multi-channel videos can be used for several purposes. Primarily, we use them here in order to sync up video with many channels of audio. So that way we can have a click track, some stereo tracks, going to front of house, then also having a couple isolated channels that front of house can have full control over. This video does not control an alpha layer, but it can also be used in order to have greater control over keying at your switcher. To date, you are not able to create a multi-audio video in Final Cut, so we're going to be using Premiere. So I've gone ahead and created a file. I'm going to save it to my external drive just to save on space. And it doesn't really matter what type of project it is, just that it's created. And the more specific settings are going to be created in the sequence settings. So far, I've only been able to create the proper settings when I create a new sequence, and I'm not able to edit the settings once the sequence is already created. Again, none of these project settings seem to matter, so I'm just going to ignore them all and continue on. To create the sequence, you click on the little icon, New Sequence, and I've created a preset so I don't need to redo all these settings every single time, but I'm going to start from scratch. The easiest way to create sequence settings is to go into the DSLR category 1080p 30 and just select that. Then we can go over to settings and make sure we have everything correct. I prefer 2997 frames per second because it gives us the smoothest playback when we convert it to 5994i. And finally, we have the audio settings. So we're going to make sure that we have plenty of audio tracks, and we're going to go down, select multi-channel, and we're just going to add a bunch of channels, 1 through 8. And then we're going to go through and pan each one left and right. So what I did is just make sure the output assignment was correct. Let me just go through and finish all these. All right, now I'm going to check my output assignments, make sure they're correct. And as I click on this, I can see that I do not have 3 through 8 available. So what I need to do is 2 more additional steps. The first is to go through on the track type and select mono for every single one of them. And then I'm going to need to go up to the master, and in number of channels, I'll just hit that drop down and select 8. In this video, I'm creating 8 channels because that's what we have available in PVS, ProPresenter, and Resi, but I can easily create a 4-channel or 16-channel video just the same. Now that I have the number of channels correct, I can go through and select the correct output assignment. Something to note is that if I put these tracks in something other than 1 and 2, I won't necessarily be able to monitor them. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to keep channels 1 and 2 unselected in everything but the first and second audio channel. But it may be more helpful to you to edit the video with 1 and 2 selected, even though we won't be using it before export. So we'll just have to go back in to the sequence settings and unselect it. Now I'll just go back through and check my work, and once I'm sure everything is correct, I'll just hit the OK button. And you'll notice I do have the opportunity to save the preset so I don't have to go through all this process in the future. Now that I have my sequence, I can go up and hit the audio tab, and I can see all the 8 tracks that I added, and then right below that pan knob, I can see where each of those outputs are going to. So if I need to make a change in here, like putting the tracks in 1 and 2 just for monitoring purposes, I can go in and do that. We recently did a song called Reach, where we had a lyric video and a story video, and then we had a bunch of multi-tracks that needed to go to in-ears and then the front of house and other places. So I'm just going to grab all those and bring them into the project. And you can do that either through the import tab or just simply dragging them into the project window. Ahead of time, I've mapped out all the channels. So 1 and 2 is going to be nothing, and 3 is going to be nothing. 4 is the click and guide. 5 and 6 are the stereo tracks. 7 is the piano, and 8 is the lead vocal. And anything that requires stereo needs to be dragged into both lanes 5 and 6, or 7 and 8, or whatever project settings you have. Next, I need to make all these tracks mono and select the appropriate channel and map it to the correct source. The easiest way I found to do that is to right-click each of them, go to audio channels, and map each one to the left media source. So for my backing tracks in channels 5 and 6, the left one will go to the left output in channel 5, and the right one will go to the left channel in output 6. Remember, the easiest way to export that stuff is in Ableton or whatever DAW you're using. Just mute everything that you don't want in whatever tracks you need. So if you need just regular tracks, you don't want click or guide or anything else like that in there, just mute all that stuff, export it, and then repeat the same process for click and then guide and any special tracks you have like a lead vocal or piano line. Now that I'm finished with my mapping, I can mark the in and out of my sequence so that way when I export, it'll export the right stuff. And I can check that all the tracks are going to the right place. In order to check the tracks, I can just hit play and see whether or not they're going to the right audio channels on the right-hand side in my view meters. I've accidentally duplicated the click and I need to replace that track. I'm just going to select that track and delete it and drag the correct one in place. Of course, I'll need to go back in and set my audio channels appropriately. Okay, so to finish things off, I'm just going to go in and add a crossfade effect to fade in and out of all the tracks. So that way when it starts in their heads, it's not an abrupt start or stop. If I need to fine-tune any audio adjustments, I can right-click on each channel and set an appropriate gain plus or minus a couple decibels. Now we're at the point where we can go and grab our finished video, and I'll just throw it at the beginning of the timeline. I'm not going to here, but I can slip the video or audio back and forth slightly in order to make sure it's all in sync. I'm just going to drag the video in as demonstration and we'll export the video as a whole. In an ideal world, I would be editing this video separately with just a scratch track to make sure it's all in time. Then I would drag that video in and just leave the audio unmuted so I can line up the audio underneath it and then mute it at the last second before export. And now that we're ready to export this, there's a few things that we need to do to make sure the sequence settings match. And the first one is we're going to need to go into the format and select QuickTime, because what we're going to want is Apple ProRes 422. And if there's an alpha layer in it, we're going to ask for ProRes 4444. After I go in and label this something that I will be able to understand, like 8-channel tutorial, I'm going to go in and make sure all of my video settings are correct. I can see the video is 1920 by 1080 and the frame rate is 29.97. And now I'm going to go to audio, make sure the sample rate is 48,000 Hertz again, and set the sample size to 24-bit. And I'm going to go in and set all this stuff to mono. So I can do one of two things. I can set output channels to 8-channel, or I can go to mono and create 8 of those mono channels, and it's going to do the exact same thing. Now I'm just scrolling up and down to make sure 1 is patched to 1, 2 is patched to 2, and so on and so forth. Once I'm sure all this is correct, I can go down and hit export. Once the video is complete, I'm going to go and drag it back into this project, or in this case, I'm just going to open up Final Cut so I don't screw anything up. And I'm going to make sure all the channels are patched correctly. The reason I'm using Final Cut is because it's much easier for me to set everything to stereo and monitor each channel individually. That way I can make sure that I set the tracks to stereo and didn't accidentally patch the left side to both channels or vice versa. Now that it's tested and I'm sure all the tracks are exported correctly, I can drag it into PVS, ProPresenter, or Resi and run it from there. But if I didn't, I'll just go back into Premiere, make those changes, and re-export it with a different name.